A lonely stretch of road, the air heavy with the heat of the afternoon sun. The distant hum of traffic fades into silence. On the roadside sits a car, a gleaming symbol of wealth, now rendered powerless by a simple flat tire. Its owner, dressed in sharp, tailored clothes, stands beside it, frustration etched across his face. A man, used to solving problems with the snap of his fingers, now finds himself stranded, completely at the mercy of fate. But this isn't his story. Not yet. Further down the road, a boy walks alone. His figure is small, almost lost in the shimmering haze of heat. His clothes are worn, patched together with care, the soles of his shoes barely clinging on. To anyone passing by, he might appear insignificant. Just another child burdened by the weight of a world that's never been kind. But to this boy, each step forward is a quiet rebellion against the odds stacked against him. He doesn't know hunger, he lives it. He doesn't feel tired, he embodies it. Yet his eyes burn with a resilience that refuses to be extinguished, no matter how many times life has tried to snuff it out. This boy has no plans to stop. He can't afford to, not when his family depends on him, not when every day is a fight to keep dreams alive in a world that insists on crushing them. He carries with him nothing but a small bag slung over his shoulder and an unyielding determination to survive. But what he also carries, though he doesn't know it yet, is the power to change not just his future, but someone else's. As he approaches the stalled car, his pace slows. A moment of hesitation. He could walk on. It's not his problem. Why should he help? What can someone like him, who has so little, offer to someone who has so much? And yet, he stops. This is where the story begins. Two people, one caught in the grip of privilege, the other in the clutches of poverty, standing on opposite ends of the human experience, brought together by a single moment of chance. What unfolds next is not just an encounter. It is a story of kindness, humility, and transformation. It is a reminder that sometimes the smallest actions can carry the weight of 1,000 futures. As you listen to this story, I ask you to consider, what would you have done in the boy's shoes? What would you have done in the millionaire's? And could you imagine the profound consequences of that choice? One that starts small but ripples far beyond what either of them could ever have imagined. This is a story about more than just a flat tire. It's about courage in the face of scarcity. It's about compassion where none is expected. It's about how a moment of generosity can echo through the lives of strangers and leave a mark that lasts a lifetime. Stay with us as we take you on a journey, one that starts with a single act of kindness and unfolds into a tale that changes everything. What you're about to witness isn't just a story. It's a testament to the power of humanity's best instincts to shine even in the darkest of times. To understand the gravity of what's about to happen, we need to step back into the life of a young boy who had every reason to give up, but never did. His name is David. He's just 12, though his eyes, weathered beyond their years, carry the weight of someone much older. Born into a world that gave him little more than challenges, David has known hardship as intimately as he knows the cracked pavement beneath his bare feet. Home is not a place of comfort, but a cramped, dilapidated structure where the walls threaten to collapse with every storm. He shares the tiny space with his younger siblings, whom he watches over like a parent, and his mother, who works tirelessly to keep them afloat. His father, once a pillar of their household, succumbed to an illness that the family couldn't afford to treat. Each day is a test. David rises before dawn to fetch water, walking miles with a rusted bucket that feels heavier with each step. He earns a few coins selling vegetables from a pushcart, barely enough to buy a meal. Yet, despite everything, David dreams. At night, by the flickering light of a borrowed candle, he scribbles equations and words into a battered notebook. He dreams of school, of becoming someone who can lift his family from this endless cycle of poverty. He dreams of a world where the future isn't dictated by the circumstances of his birth. But life has taught him that dreams come with a cost he cannot always afford. And still, David endures, not because he expects a miracle, but because he refuses to let despair win. On the other side of the city, another life unfolds, a life that couldn't be more different. Richard Carter, a self-made millionaire, lives in a sprawling mansion adorned with marble floors and crystal chandeliers. His days are filled with meetings, decisions, and the relentless pursuit of success. To the outside world, Richard is a picture of achievement, a man who climbed the ladder of ambition and emerged at the top. But what most don't see is the isolation that wealth has brought him. Friends are hard to come by when you can buy anything. Family gatherings have dwindled into rare, awkward events overshadowed by business deals and silent resentment. Richard's life is one of abundance, yet it often feels empty. He's built a fortress of prosperity, but it has come at the expense of connection, of the simple joys he barely remembers. The paths of David and Richard seem destined never to cross, one struggling to rise from the ashes of adversity, the other burdened by the weight of his own success. And yet, fate has a way of weaving stories from threads that appear unconnected. This is where their worlds collide. As David walks along that deserted road, his feet aching and his stomach growling, he spots the shiny car parked by the side. It's unlike anything he's ever seen up close. Sleek, polished, and clearly expensive. He notices the man standing beside it, pacing, phone in hand, frustration visible in every gesture. Richard, stranded and late for an important meeting, has tried everything to fix the flat tire, but his efforts are in vain. David hesitates. He's seen men like this before, wealthy, powerful, and often dismissive of those like him. What could he possibly offer? And yet something inside him stirs. Maybe it's empathy, a recognition of someone in need, even if that someone seems to have everything. Or maybe it's the quiet voice of his mother's teachings. Help when you can, no matter how small the gesture. He doesn't know it yet, but this moment will change both their lives forever. Kindness, in its purest form, knows no boundaries. It doesn't measure wealth or status, nor does it wait for recognition. It's the small, selfless actions, like David's, that remind us of our shared humanity. And often, these moments, though fleeting, plant seeds that grow far beyond what we can see. What happens next is a testament to the extraordinary power of such acts. Stay with us as we follow this unlikely pair through an encounter that begins with a simple flat tire and transforms into a story of redemption, generosity, and hope that neither of them could have imagined. The camera pans over a dusty rural road, flanked by dry fields and the faint outlines of the town on the horizon. The sun is beginning to set, casting long shadows on the ground. David's day had been long. With his cart of vegetables now empty, he trudged along the roadside, his feet aching and his stomach reminding him of the single piece of bread he had eaten for breakfast. The dirt road stretched endlessly, familiar in its monotony, but today something was different. A car, sleek, black, and glinting faintly under the evening sun, was pulled over to the side of the road. It was a machine David had only seen in fleeting advertisements or on rare trips to the city, but here it was, incongruously parked in this barren stretch of countryside. Standing next to the car was a man in a suit, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar and his sleeves rolled up. He was pacing in frustration, a mobile phone pressed to his ear. David paused at a distance, his instincts kicking in. He had learned to observe first, to calculate before acting. The man seemed agitated, gesturing towards the car and occasionally kicking at the gravel. It wasn't difficult to guess the problem, a flat tire. David hesitated. Approaching someone like this, a man who exuded wealth and authority, was daunting. What if he dismisses me? What if he shouts at me to leave? These thoughts raced through his mind. And yet, there was something about the scene, the desperation in the man's movements, the way he stared at his phone like it held answers he couldn't find, that compelled David to step forward. He glanced down at his own shoes, worn and dusty, and then at the car again. The contrast between their worlds couldn't have been starker, but David's mother's voice echoed in his mind. Help when you can, no matter who it is. It wasn't the first time her wisdom had guided him, and he knew it wouldn't be the last. With a deep breath, David set his cart down by the roadside and walked towards the car. Each step felt heavier than the last, not because of exhaustion, but because of the uncertainty of what awaited him. The man noticed him almost immediately, his eyebrows furrowing in confusion. "Hey, kid," the man called out, his voice sharp but not unkind. "What are you doing here?" David stopped a few feet away, his hands instinctively clasping the straps of his threadbare bag. I saw your car, sir. Looks like you have a flat tire," he said, his voice steady despite his nerves. The man sighed, running a hand through his neatly combed hair. "Yeah, and my roadside service is useless out here. I've been trying to fix it myself, but—" He trailed off, glancing at his hands, which were smeared with grease. David's gaze shifted to the flat tire. It was deflated entirely, and the tools lying scattered on the ground suggested an attempt had been made to replace it. He couldn't help but notice that the spare tire still rested in the trunk, untouched. "If you don't mind, sir, I can help," David offered, stepping closer. The man looked at him, his eyes narrowing slightly. He seemed to weigh his options. Finally, he gestured towards the car. "You know how to do it?" David nodded. He didn't tell the man that he had learned by necessity, helping neighbors fix their motorbikes and bicycles for a few extra coins. This was just a bigger, fancier version of the same skill. "All right," the man said, stepping back. "Go ahead." As David knelt by the car, examining the tire and the tools, his focus sharpened. The hesitation and self-doubt melted away, replaced by the quiet confidence of someone used to solving problems with limited resources. He worked methodically, loosening bolts, positioning the jack, and replacing the tire. The man watched, his expression shifting from skepticism to surprise. This boy, with his oversized shirt and too thin frame, was doing what he, a millionaire accustomed to solving complex problems, could not. The sun dipped lower as David tightened the last bolt and stood up, wiping his hands on his pants. "There you go, sir. It should be good now," he said, stepping back. The man stared at the car, then at David. "You just did it, like it was nothing," he said, almost to himself. "What's your name?" "David, sir," he replied, picking up his bag and moving to retrieve his cart. "Wait," the man called after him. "Let me pay you for your time." He reached for his wallet. David shook his head, a small, shy smile on his face. "That's okay, sir. I was just helping. You don't have to pay me." The man froze, his hand hovering over the cash in his wallet. People didn't refuse money, especially not people who looked like they needed it. This boy was full of surprises. David adjusted the straps on his bag and nodded respectfully. "Have a good evening, sir." And with that, he turned and began to walk away, leaving the man standing there, wallet in hand, and 1,000 questions swirling in his mind. The man watches David disappear down the road, the start of something deeper, a connection that neither of them fully understands yet. David, kneeling next to the car, carefully assessing the flat tire and the scattered tools. David crouched by the flat tire, his fingers brushing over the bolts to check their condition. Though the tools were shiny and unfamiliar in his world, their function was clear. He carefully lifted the jack, positioning it under the car frame. "Have you done this before?" the man asked skeptically, his arms crossed. "A few times," David replied modestly, his focus never wavering. He didn't mention that his practice had been on old bicycles and the occasional neighbor's motorcycle. This car was in another league entirely, but he was confident in his ability to make it work. The millionaire, whose name David still didn't know, paced back and forth. The man occasionally glanced at his phone, which still showed no signal. His impatience was evident, but there was also a flicker of curiosity as he watched David work. As David loosened the bolts on the damaged tire, he asked casually, "What brings you out here, sir? We don't see many cars like this around." The man hesitated before answering. "I was on my way to a business meeting in the next town. Didn't realize how isolated this area was. Bad timing, I guess." David chuckled softly. Bad timing, or maybe good timing, depending on how you see it. The man raised an eyebrow. "Good timing? How do you figure?" David shrugged, lifting the spare tire from the trunk. "Well, if you'd broken down somewhere else, you might not have found someone to help you. Out here, people look out for each other." The millionaire seemed to mull this over, watching as David secured the spare tire in place. For someone so young, David spoke with a wisdom that felt out of place in his slight, scrappy frame. As David tightened the bolts on the spare tire, he asked, "Do you travel a lot for work?" The man nodded. "All the time. Meetings, deals, conferences. It never stops." He paused, then added, almost to himself, "It's not always as glamorous as people think." David smiled faintly, wiping his hands on his pants. "I wouldn't know about glamorous, but it sounds like you're making a difference, even if it's hard sometimes." The man tilted his head, surprised. "That's an interesting way to look at it. Most people just think about the money." David stood up, brushing the dust from his knees. "Money's important, sure, but it's not everything. My mom always said it's what you do with what you have that matters." There was a silence between them as the man stared at David, his expression softening. It was clear that this boy had seen hardships the millionaire couldn't begin to fathom. Yet he spoke with a quiet dignity that left the man feeling both humbled and inspired. David picked up the scattered tools and returned them neatly to the trunk. "All set, sir. It should get you to the next town without any trouble." The man looked at the car, then back at David. "You're really something, kid. I don't know how to thank you." David smiled, his face lighting up despite his tiredness. "You don't have to thank me, sir. I was just doing what anyone would do." The millionaire shook his head. "That's where you're wrong. Most people wouldn't have stopped, let alone gone out of their way to help a stranger. You've got a good heart, David." David glanced down, slightly embarrassed by the praise. "Just doing what I can," he said quietly. The man pulled out his wallet, thumbing through a thick stack of bills. "At least let me give you something for your time and effort." David stepped back, shaking his head. "That's okay, sir. I didn't do it for money." The man froze, staring at the boy in disbelief. It wasn't every day he encountered someone who would turn down cash, especially someone who clearly needed it. "You're really not going to take it?" he asked. David shook his head again, his smile unwavering. "No, sir, just happy to help. You take care now." He began to walk back towards his cart, leaving the man standing by the car, his wallet still in his hand. As David reached his cart and began pulling it back towards town, the man called out, "David!" David turned, shading his eyes from the setting sun. "If I ever see you again," the man said, his voice steady, "I'll make sure to repay this kindness." David waved, his voice carrying across the quiet road. "No need, sir, just pay it forward." David, walking into the distance, his cart creaking softly, as the millionaire leans against his car, deep in thought. David, as he walks down the road, pulling his cart, the sun sinking lower on the horizon. The millionaire, seated in his car, hesitates before stepping out and calling after him. "David, wait!" David stopped, turning around with a questioning look. The man jogged toward him, his polished shoes crunching on the gravel. "You really won't take anything for helping me?" the man asked again, his tone almost pleading. David shook his head, smiling faintly. "I didn't do it for a reward, sir. I saw someone who needed help, that's all." The man looked at him for a long moment, his curiosity deepening. "Most people wouldn't even stop, let alone refuse a reward. Why are you different?" David hesitated, glancing at his cart. The weight of his struggles was etched into every line on his young face, but he wasn't used to sharing his burdens. Something about the man's sincere tone made him open up. "I guess," David began, his voice soft, "I know what it's like to need help and not have anyone there." The man furrowed his brow. "What do you mean?" David sighed, leaning on the handle of his cart. "It's just me and my mom. She's been sick for a while, and I do odd jobs to keep us going. Most days it's enough to get by, some days not so much." The man's gaze dropped to the worn cart and the makeshift goods inside, bundles of firewood, a few jars of homemade preserves. He noticed the frayed edges of David's clothes, the holes in his shoes. "You're just a kid," the man said, his voice tinged with disbelief and sorrow. "You shouldn't have to carry all that." David shrugged, his expression steady. "Life doesn't always wait for you to be ready. You just do what you have to." There was a pause, the weight of David's words settling between them. "What about school?" the man asked. David looked down, scuffing the dirt with his shoe. "I go when I can, but with Mom being sick I miss a lot. She's the most important thing." The man's jaw tightened, his mind racing. This boy, this remarkable, selfless boy, had every reason to be bitter or defeated, yet he wasn't. Instead, he had stopped to help a stranger without expecting anything in return. "You're incredible, you know that?" the man said, his voice filled with admiration. David blushed, shaking his head. "I'm just doing my best, like anyone would." The man laughed softly, a sad smile on his face. "I wish that were true, David, I really do." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sounds of the evening, chirping crickets, the rustle of leaves, filled the silence. Then the man took a deep breath. "What's your dream, David?" he asked suddenly. David looked up, surprised by the question. He thought for a moment, his eyes distant. "I'd like to be able to take care of my mom properly, give her the life she deserves, and maybe—" He hesitated, as if afraid to voice the rest. "Maybe?" the man prompted gently. David smiled wistfully. "Maybe, someday, I'd like to go to school full-time, learn something useful, become someone who can really make a difference." The man's heart clenched. He had spent his life chasing wealth and success, yet here was a boy with almost nothing, dreaming not for himself but for those he loved. "You're already making a difference, David," the man said softly. "More than you know." David smiled again, a little shyly. "Thanks, sir, but I still have a lot to do." He glanced at his cart. "I should get going. Mom's waiting for me." The man nodded, though a part of him didn't want to let David walk away just yet. "Do you come this way often?" he asked. David nodded. "Most days. I sell firewood and other things to people in town. It's about a 2-mile walk from here." The man pulled out a business card, pressing it into David's hand. "Take this. If you ever need anything at all, you call me. Promise me, David." David looked at the card, the embossed letters spelling out the man's name and title. He frowned slightly, unsure if he'd ever use it. "I don't know, sir. You've already got your car fixed. That's enough." The man placed a hand on David's shoulder, his gaze steady. "Promise me." David nodded reluctantly. "Okay, sir, I promise." The man smiled, though his eyes were still clouded with thought. "Take care, David." "You too, sir," David replied, turning back toward his cart. David walks away, his small figure framed against the fading light. The man watches him go, a determined look settling on his face. The town in the early morning light, where David is pushing his cart through the streets. He stops briefly to adjust his load before continuing his daily route. Unknown to him, the millionaire, who had been quietly observing from his car the day before, was following him. The man steps out of his car with a purposeful look. The man walks up to David, who turns around, startled but quickly recovering. "David," the man calls out, "can we talk for a moment?" David nods hesitantly, his heart racing. "What is it, sir?" The man takes a deep breath, his face serious yet soft with warmth. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said yesterday, about your dreams, and I want to help." David looks puzzled, his brows furrowed. "Help? But I didn't do anything for that." The man smiles gently. "You've done more than you realize. You've shown me what it means to help without expecting anything in return, something not many people understand." David's eyes flicker with a mix of confusion and hope. The millionaire continues, "I'm offering you something that can change everything. I want to sponsor your education. I'm paying for your school, David, every penny, and I'll arrange a mentorship program for you too. There's so much potential in you, and I want to help you reach it." David stands frozen, unable to process what he's hearing. His heart pounds in his chest, and for a moment, the world feels still. "Are you sure?" David asks, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I'm worth all of that." The man steps closer, placing a hand on David's shoulder. "You're more than worth it. I've seen the way you've handled your struggles with grace. That's what I want to help foster. You've already shown you have the character that many others lack." David's face softens, and tears begin to well up in his eyes. The weight of his life, the struggles, the nights worrying about his mom, it all comes crashing down in that single moment. The millionaire continues, "It's not just about the money. I'm going to help you gain the tools and opportunities to change your life. But what you do with them, that's on you. I believe in you, David." David nods, unable to speak, his heart swelling with emotion. The scene shifts to David entering a school building for the first time in years. He's dressed in neat clothes, carrying a backpack, the same determination in his eyes, but now with a new sense of purpose. The camera follows him as he meets with mentors, attends classes, and receives academic support. Each milestone is captured, a tutoring session, a new lesson learned, and slowly his confidence builds. As time passes, David's work ethic becomes evident. He becomes an active participant in class, asking questions, challenging his own ideas, and pushing beyond the limits he once thought existed. He learns to dream not just for survival but for success. His mentorship sessions with the millionaire continue. The man teaches him the nuances of business, leadership, and perseverance. David learns how to carry himself with poise, how to think critically, and how to turn his challenges into strengths. Through their conversations, David gains insight into the value of hard work and honesty, and his vision for his future expands. One day, as David walks through a city park, now in his early 20s, he notices a billboard with his face on it, representing a new community initiative he's helped launch with the millionaire's guidance. His heart swells with pride as he thinks back to where he started, fixing a flat tire for a stranger, unsure of how his life would unfold. David's transformation extends beyond education and career. He becomes an advocate for underprivileged youth, inspiring them to take ownership of their own dreams, just as he had. The community begins to recognize him not just as a success story, but as a mentor and leader. Cut to David, standing at a podium, speaking at a local charity event, his voice strong and clear. "Sometimes," he says, "all it takes is one person to believe in you. One act of kindness can change the course of your life. I am here today because a stranger, a man I didn't know, saw something in me, and I know that each of you has that same potential." The audience listens intently, moved by his words as the camera lingers on David's face. His eyes are filled with hope, gratitude, and determination, qualities that he's carried with him every step of the way. Revealing the wide crowd as David continues to speak, his message resonating with everyone in the room. David's journey serves as a beacon of hope for many. It's not just about the money or the rewards he received. It's about the ripple effect of kindness and opportunity. The millionaire's decision to invest in David didn't just change one life, it sparked a movement. David's story spreads, inspiring others to give back, to invest in those who are often overlooked, and to challenge the assumptions of success and worth. We see images of other young people being mentored, their lives slowly transforming, their futures full of promise. David, standing in front of a crowd at a charity event, surrounded by young people from different walks of life, all inspired by his journey. He smiles warmly as he looks back at the audience, now deeply moved by the message he's about to share. Life doesn't always give us the opportunities we want, but sometimes it gives us the ones we need. A simple act of kindness, a moment when we reach out without expecting anything in return, can change everything. All it took was a flat tire, a small gesture, and the belief that things could be different. And it wasn't just my life that changed. It's the lives of so many others who now have hope because of that one moment. The camera pans out to show the growing crowd of young people in the room, all nodding and smiling as they listen intently. Empathy and generosity, those are the true drivers of change. They don't just open doors for us. They help others step through them too. When we show kindness, when we see others as people, not as problems or strangers, we bridge the divides that keep us apart, and together, we create something bigger than ourselves. Look around you. Everyone here has the power to make a difference. It starts with one simple act, one small change. So today, I challenge you, be kind. Help someone who needs it. Share a story of someone who's impacted you. And who knows, maybe your kindness will change the world too. David smiles, his voice now filled with conviction. So, I ask you, what will you do with your chance? What small act of kindness will you offer today? Some start making small gestures toward each other, while others make mental notes of how they can contribute. David, walking down a busy street, his demeanor calm yet confident. He looks up at a sign which reads, "Together we rise." The screen fades to black with the text, "Kindness is a choice. Choose to make a difference." David, walking down a bustling city street, smiling as he passes by people of all backgrounds. The camera follows him as he reflects on his journey, his steps now purposeful and full of determination. The uplifting music begins to play softly as the narrative draws to a close. It's been a year since that moment with the flat tire, and my life has completely transformed. I'm no longer just the boy who helped a stranger. I'm now a part of something bigger, a movement of kindness, empathy, and community. David engaging with people in his community, volunteering at local events, and mentoring younger individuals, all while his voice continues to inspire. But it wasn't just me. So many people around the world are stepping up every day, showing kindness in their own unique ways. Whether it's a smile, a helping hand, or offering an opportunity to someone in need, those small actions change lives. And together, we can make the world a better place, one act at a time. Transform lives with kindness. Change the world, one step at a time. If you've been moved by this story, don't just sit there. Take action. Help someone in need. Start a conversation about empathy and the power of kindness. Let's keep the momentum going. For more inspiring real-life stories like mine, and to learn how you can make a difference, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Share your own stories of kindness in the comments below, and don't forget to like and share this video to spread the word. Together, we can continue changing the world, one kind act at a time.